We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. My name is Michael Evans, and you are listening to America's Voice Now. I want to thank you for joining with us this morning. We'll be joined by Pastor Tim Manning a little bit later in our broadcast today. He'll be discussing with us a raid that occurred at his home in North Carolina, and I think you'll be interested to hear a little bit more about what this individual has to say. He's a North Carolina pastor whose home was raided because his son and he are firearms enthusiasts, and it's a very, very disturbing story. So I'll leave that until our later on in our broadcast. I do want to mention this morning a couple of news issues that are critically important for us to be aware of. The first is that the news is out that under the new immigration bill that is currently being discussed in the House and the Senate, a couple of issues have come to light. One, by 2014, all taxpayers must report personal health ID info to the IRS with relation to the issue of Obamacare. Now, quite frankly, what that tells you is that the IRS will be the new enforcement arm for Obamacare, and the individual mandate will be a reporting mandate that will require that all Americans submit their health information to the IRS, and whether or not you have health insurance, and you'll be required to show proof of it via your tax documentation. And I apologize, I want to clarify, that's not in the immigration bill. That's just a standard function of the Obamacare mandate that's hitting us. The second issue is that under the new immigration bill, a biometric database requirement will be incorporated into that will require all Americans to submit to a biometric database. This is, again, more of this Big Brother 1984 come to live with us. Buried in the 800 pages of the bipartisan legislation. By the way, bipartisan in this case means equally traitorous on both sides of the political fence, is language that mandates that the creation of an innocuously named photo tool. The photo tool is a massive federal database administered by the DHS, and it contains names, ages, social security number, and the photograph of everyone in the United States with a driver's license or state-issued photo ID. What this tells us is that if you read between the lines as an astute and critical thinker, you'll recognize that because a number of states, Missouri included, have refused to participate in Real ID, they're going to go about getting the information in another fashion, effectively undermining the law. Now, what this tells you is that the information, and this is from their own statement, that any time you obtain a job, the employer will be forced to go in there and look in the database and verify that you are actually you. This is the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. You can call it the Tyranny Act if you want, because that's probably what it's really geared for. It's aimed at curbing unemployment of undocumented immigrants. So, like everything else that government does, let's take the absolute minimal minority of problem that we have and make it a rule that all Americans have to be abused for the tracking of the few. This is just like the gun legislation. This is just like all legislation that passes. Because we have a minority problem we're going to penalize everyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not the ideal of America. I refuse to be participating in a database. I won't do it. And you shouldn't either. In fact, under this Americans for Tax Reform issue, where they're forcing you to issue your personal health identification information, no. The answer is simply no. You may not have it. You're not entitled. I'm not giving it to you. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you do. What are you going to do? Jail 80 million of us? No. The answer is simply no. You may not have it. The simple problem here, folks, is this. We are every single day falling under additional tyranny and oppression, minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour, bill by bill. The IRS news this morning is that over the weekend, the IRS has been probing groups opposed to government, teaching the Constitution, anyone who has the name Patriot in their name. These are corporations that filed for a 501c4 designation, which is a tax-exempt organization that purports to want to lobby. They're lobbying organizations. If you had the word Patriot, 912, or Tea Party in your name, or you opposed government, or you teach the Constitution, or you reference a better way of life for America, or even if you disparage this administration, the IRS pushed or looked deeper into your application and demanded that you provide all kinds of supporting documentation. In one case, they actually asked for every post to every to the agency or the organization's Facebook page that had ever been made by any and all followers. Folks, I don't care how you look at it. That is a police state. Make no mistake about it. This is a police state. This shooting that occurred at Mother's Day Parade in New Orleans, they're going through recorded cell phone conversations. Well, first of all, that means they had to have the wherewithal and the ability to record every telephone conversation that was occurring that day at that given location. That, my friends, is called surveillance. And we live in an environment where our government watches everything that you do. The ACLU came out and said your Facebook and private emails are not safe from FBI surveillance. All of this is being done with the simple mandate that we have to monitor every aspect of your life. That you are constantly on camera, that you are constantly being monitored, that every phone call, every email search that you do is being looked upon to determine whether or not you are a threat to the government. Hey, folks, wake up. We are the government. I don't know what more it's going to take before Americans say, we've had enough. Homeland Security recently just funded a new study and an exercise that portrayed homeschoolers as terrorists. If you don't take the information of where all of this is leading, I don't know what more you're waiting for. Police battling angry parents in a simulated shooting at a school. Come on, folks. This you may classify this as limited evidence value. I get it. It's circumstantial because the government hasn't come right out and said, yes, we're committing treason. But it doesn't change the value of that evidence. You don't need to have empirical evidence to find the party guilty. You know, when you find a guy who's driving down the road and he's got a bloody knife on the front seat and a ski mask and he's got burglary tools in the back of his trunk and he's got blood on his hands, the evidence is overwhelming that the person who was killed a block and a half away, and there were witnesses who saw him there, that he's the guilty party. He doesn't have to admit to it. We are on trial here, and our government is the one who should be on trial. Your job, my job, are as prosecutors. It is our obligation to prove the case. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Mike Evans. We'll be back in just a moment.
They say they want to control your guns, but what they really want to do is control you. Hi, it's Glenn Beck. Since the gun debate was settled in 1791, it's obvious this debate is really about control. Control over taxes, healthcare, schools, and yes, our Second Amendment rights. My new book, Control, Exposing the Truth About Guns, picks apart line by line the idiotic gun control arguments being spewed all over the media. From Piers Morgan to Michael Bloomberg to Rachel Maddow, the lies and now. Control, a new book by me, Glenn Beck. Pick it up or download your copy today. Visit glennbeck.com for more.
It's a call and make your voice heard on the biggest issues making headlines today or on absolutely anything in your head. Every call I get goes on the air totally unscreened. It's unpredictable and uncensored, and you'll never know what to expect. Anything can and will happen on the next Alan Colmes Show.
And that's who you can catch every weeknight, 9 till midnight. The Alan Colmes Show on the Ozarks Best News Talk, 107.1 The Point, Monday through Friday.
You know, the evidence is so stark, so glaring, so obvious to anyone willing to look upon it that we cannot help but see the guilty party. You know, if this were a court of law, recognize something. Let's just analyze this for a moment. What you have here is Uncle Sam on trial. And you, as the listener, you, as the educated patriot, you, as the individual who understands the implications of the actions of the criminal, in this case, Uncle Sam, your job is to convince the jury of doubters that there is a crime been committed. How do you accomplish that goal? How do you accomplish that end? Well, for starters, you have to recognize that Uncle Sam, the party on trial, is looked upon like a great guy. Everybody in the community knows him. He's a guy who gives out food to the poor. He's a guy who pays for people's health care. He's a guy who has defended neighbors. He's a guy who has stepped in and helped out in a number of different emergency situations that have happened in the community. And he sits up there in his patriotic costume, and he portrays himself as this benevolent, wonderful person. And everyone on the jury is automatically conditioned to say, how can this guy be bad? How can this individual, Uncle Sam, whom we all know and love, be guilty of these terrible crimes that you are purporting he has committed? And essentially what it comes down to is it is your job as the prosecutor to be able to put forth enough evidence to prove Uncle Sam is guilty. Guilty of treason. Guilty of murder. Guilty of theft. Guilty of the betrayal of the community's trust. They don't see or know the dark side. Your job is to educate them, to inform them. And let me tell you something. The judge in this case is making you or is barring a lot of evidence from getting to the jury's eyes. I mean, I just want you to play with this scenario for a minute. The judge, every time you bring up an issue and point out that you want to present this evidence, the judge blocks the jury from hearing the evidence. The judge in this case is played by the media. And they essentially say, well, wait a second, that can't go to the jury. We don't want the jury to hear the evidence of what's really happening. The evidence of the signature of the National Defense Authorization Act. The evidence of the IRS who's investigating any group that purports to speak negatively against the United States of America and what's going on in our nation. The evidence that biometric databases are being built on every member of the jury in the community. The fact that Uncle Sam was in charge of a gun running operation while standing out there on the street corner portraying how good it could be in protecting civilians in the United States and the jury members in the pool in the community from gun violence in their streets. You see, this is the old adage. If you think about it from the perspective of historical reference, this is like trying to put your local Godfather on trial in his own community. Everybody in the community looks at the Godfather and says, I know that man. He's walked my streets. He's eaten in our restaurants. He shops in our stores. He's a man who's lent money out in our community. He's a man who's given money to the poor. He helped Mrs. McGillicuddy when she had a health problem. And many, many, many of those community members know that there's something dark and sinister about the Godfather's work. But because he's a benefactor directly in their lives, they pretend those facts don't exist. And now they're sitting in a jury pool and they must hear the evidence. But the judge is slanted. The judge is determined that these people on the jury won't hear all the evidence. And the judge keeps insisting and cutting in and saying, but wait, what about that time he helped Mrs. McGillicuddy with her health problem? What about the fact that he bailed out all the businesses when the economy went down? That's not the judge's role, is it? A judge is intended to be impartial. A judge is intended to be unbiased. You see, it's impossible for Uncle Sam to get a fair and impartial trial here because the judge, a.k.a. the media, won't allow the facts to go to the jury. The jury is the pool of American people. Your job as the prosecutor is to educate and make the jury aware of all of the dark and sinister underbelly of the accused. In this case, Uncle Sam. I get it. It's a challenge. It's a tough job. Nobody wants to hear about the fact that Uncle Sam refused to send his boys when his own guys were being murdered in the next town over called Benghazi. Nobody wants to hear that he sends his henchmen out to murder people in other states He calls those guys drones. Nobody wants to hear that his collectors charge more money for protection. If you are not allied with Uncle Sam, if you teach in the community and you don't teach Uncle Sam is the best thing since canned peas and sliced bread, those boys come down on you. You know what I'm saying? What we have, ladies and gentlemen, is a corruption that has infected our executive, Uncle Sam, our legislative, and our judicial, the judge. What we have here is a press corps and a mainstream media propaganda ministry that is intent on destroying the United States of America from within. What we have is the alleged sitting up on the witness stand or in the jury box who has committed horrific crimes against his own community. And what's occurred is all of the evidence against him, the judge, a.k.a. the media, is preventing the jury from hearing. I got to tell you, it's no wonder that all that the jury hears is glowing things. Go ahead, caller.
The reason I was calling is you keep on talking about the IRS, and I was thinking about some of our history here when first of all, the IRS, a lot of people don't realize it. It's just a private entity. It's contracting work, if you will, under supposedly the legislative branch of Congress. But it has close ties with the Treasury Department, which falls under POTUS, President. So we have something here that from the 1930s, when they went ahead and they wanted to take care of Al Capone in Chicago, they used the IRS. They couldn't use all the laws that they had.
Well, let me tell you about how they use the IRS. Are you aware that because the Second Amendment exists, there can be no law that prohibits firearms usage or possession
of any kind?
Of any kind, right?
Right, like speech.
Correct. So when
religion.
What's that?
Religion.
Yeah.
Congress shall make no law. It specifically says that about religion, but
the Second Amendment is even stronger than that.
Right.
It's cut from an even mightier bedrock. It
straightforward.
says very clearly, shall not be infringed, and that means by anyone: Congress, the executive, the judicial, everyone. Right?
Yep.
Whereas the first says Congress shall make no law. So, when we get to the Second Amendment, they're even more effusive about the limitations that are placed.
Adamant.
No one shall infringe, period.
Adamant.
End of argument.
Yep, adamant.
Now, the way the federal government gets around that is they have passed or utilize intrastate commerce laws that say that if a gun is transported across state lines, it falls under the rules of interstate commerce, and therefore there's a taxational issue associated with it, and that's how they use the IRS. And then they go even one step further and say, well, we've passed a tax on this type of firearm or that type of firearm, and if you don't pay it, and you're not in the logbook of payers, then we have the right to put you in prison. And I'm a living example of it. Because in my own personal situation, I did 3 years in a federal prison for a crime I didn't commit. And you know what they used? IRS Tax Code Title 26, because there was no law that prohibited me from having a firearm. But there was a law that said I didn't pay a tax on that firearm, which by the way, they sold me.
Right.
And so therefore, what you end up with is their ability to literally take you and say, great, now we've got you in a way that you can't possibly squirm out of. We've got the loop around your neck. We're going to take a break in just a second, and I'll put you on hold for a minute.
All right.
We've got a loop around your neck, and there's no way you can escape. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Salchi Ingrasso. Congressional Republicans investigating the Benghazi terrorist attacks suggest depositions for high-ranking officials.
House Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa wants to hear from the chairman of that panel that reviewed the attack, that State Department's actions before and after the Benghazi attack. One of them is veteran diplomat Thomas Pickering.
Fox Radio's Rich Johnson.
Issa says he wants to talk to both Pickering and retired Admiral Mike Mullen in private and under oath.
But California Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein says the congressional review seems aimed at discrediting former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her potential 2016 presidential bid. A half dozen people killed in a Pennsylvania house fire.
4 adults and 2 children are dead after the fire in Pottsville, Schuylkill County. Fire officials say the blaze broke out 5 minutes before midnight Sunday into Monday and was under control within an hour.
Bob Howard with Fox affiliate WHP. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Get a hold of Brian down at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. You can call him at 870-492-4030, or you can find him on the web at ozarkmtnselfreliance.com. Located a half-mile east of Walmart and Route 62 in Mountain Home. My friends over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery at 255-2253, number 2 Evans Arcade off the square in West Plains. Best damn bakery in 100 miles. You can reach Mary at 255-2253. My friend Bill Stone over at Stone Construction at 293-0116. Whether remodeling or doing new or custom construction or light commercial, Bill's the guy for you. 293-0116. West Plains Pawn and Gun, located on Route 160, just about a mile east of Walmart on the right-hand side. westplainspawn.com. You can also reach them by a telephone at 417-256-3000. Friends over at the battery station at 303 Washington Avenue, right off the square in West Plains. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com, and you can call them at 417-257-7799. Also, don't forget to stop by Pizza Hut for an outstanding lunch special between 11 and 2. Salad and pasta all together. You can also visit them on Tuesday evenings for family night. Kids eat free under 12. And Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop, the sponsor of our telephone line. Make sure that you see Wits End Classic Barbershop for your next shave and a haircut. Outstanding, fine young man, and a great patriot as well. He's on the square in West Plains.
If you're looking for great deals on iPads or Kindles, look no further than your neighborhood Radio Shack authorized sales center. They've got great deals on the latest iPads and Kindles. Maybe you need a new GPS or an MP3 player to get your music library ready for those barbecues. Whatever your electronic needs, stop by your local neighborhood Radio Shack authorized dealer in West Plains at 1408 Southern Hills Shopping Center or call 417-256-1819.
Weather is a service of News Talk 107.1 The Point. Contact Josh or Cody at 255-2548 for more information on making weather sponsorships part of your marketing plans.
On the Point Weather Center for this morning, clear skies, sunshine through the day, the high 74, mainly clear and not nearly as chilly tonight, low 54. Sunny and warmer tomorrow with a high of 88. Partly sunny Wednesday, maybe an afternoon thunderstorm, high 82. I'm staff meteorologist Jim Rinaldi, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
America's Voice Now, delivering truth over mainstream propaganda every single day. Hi, my name is Michael Evans, and I'm your host, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. Join me daily for important guests and my unique slant on hot topics in the news. Visit americasvoicenow.org for even more news, articles, and commentary, and watch our show streaming live to your PC. Share your morning with me. Get educated, informed, motivated, and activated. America's Voice Now, right here on 107.1.
So you see here, folks, the issue is that the IRS is being used as a enforcer for the mob, right? While and this is essentially what it really comes down to. the IRS is creating the enemies list for the government and then going out and hunting those enemies down. Go ahead, caller. You were expounding on something before the break, and I had to run through that.
Well, just like you pointed out before about using it as a tool, I think it's duplicitous though, because this is one of the things that we don't realize about our government. Just to take an example, we're using the IRS to go ahead and put Al Capone in jail. You got from a tax thing. I mean, come on, $200, and how many other people have done that in our own governments? And I say plural because each state is a nation, We're just a republic, and people don't realize that. But each state is this nation. So these different nations, these different countries and lands, they all go ahead and say, yeah, we'll go ahead and do this. But a lot of times they go ahead and they say, no, we're not going to go ahead and enforce that on this particular person. And that duplicity, or that hypocrisy, if you will, it goes all the way down to here. So we have a duplicitous government that goes and says in Congress that insider trading, they put Martha Stewart in jail when she's sitting just sitting at a nice dinner, a formal dinner at friend's house, where there's a lot of other big wigs around, and she hears something and she says, I'm going to sell my stock. That's all. There was no other information to get. The man did not go ahead and go to prison, because if it was that way, that you follow what I'm saying. The information came supposedly from him, so he should have gone to jail. He should have pressed charges or been charged. The same thing with the Congress. They can go ahead and do insider trading. They are actually on committees about the approval of the FDA drugs that are going to be approved, which, as you know, here in the past 10, 20 years, I mean, how many commercials do we keep on seeing about if you've taken this drug or you've done this procedure, which they approved and profited off of? A congressman goes in, broke, owing money, millions of dollars for getting his campaign on the road and getting into office, and all of a sudden, this guy's rich when he's leaving? It's the same thing like happens, about 15, 20 years ago, there was this big thing about all these congressmen and all these senators that could take their money home with them that was left over from their campaign contributions.
They still can, you know that, right?
But, yeah, they had a grandfather clause, though. So a lot of them quit. But then they made other laws that will let them take more money later on down the road, because the ones that were left behind out of the grandfather clause needed to find a way. Just like recently we found out about this whole thing that the uproar that they made actually a law against a congressman insider trading. But we still don't have the exposition of where they're getting their monies from. They come out millionaires. But right here in our local government in West Plains, did you know it's illegal to have a yard sale? If you own your property, pay your taxes, and you own the thing that you're going to go ahead and sell, that you cannot put something on your yard for sale without the permission and payment to the city government. Now, you'd think this might be just a misdemeanor, something civil, but they made it a criminal. Now, they made it a criminal act. You can actually go to jail by violating this. It's absurd.
Of course it is. Here's what you have to recognize, folks, is that the IRS is the boys for every administration, not just the current corrupt one that we have in power today.
And they changed it.
But the IRS has always been the enforcement arm of the mob that we currently reference to as our federal government today. And when we talk about, and then they use the courts to give them protection. I'll give you a perfect example. Attorney General Eric Holder and the Department of Justice have asked the federal court to indefinitely delay a lawsuit brought by the watchdog group Judicial Watch. You know why? They're trying to protect Judicial Watch from getting the information under a Freedom of Information Act that requests that all documents related to Fast and Furious be returned and relating especially to the claims of executive privilege that were invoked by Obama. So here you have the Don Obama giving cover to his number one right-hand guy and saying that our conversations here are restricted, but the law says that you cannot protect under executive privilege the conversations that would be used to create a cover up, right? I mean, that executive privilege only works when you are actually, protecting something that's of national security, not your own butt.
There are laws to go ahead and keep them from going to jail.
And exactly, and that's essentially what they've done. Is they are asking the court to protect those records so that they'll never come out to the American people, the jury, and so that the jury will never understand exactly what the truth is. And here they're going to judges, which for all intents and purposes rely upon this government, this Don, for their livelihood and the benefit of their position. So whose loyalty do you think that judge holds? I mean, it's pathetic.
Everybody wants their job.
Well, and let me tell you something. A federal judgeship is about $180,000 to $200,000 a year job, and it's a lifetime job.
Yep.
And the only way you can get removed, by the way, is for malfeasance. And
that doesn't happen.
Well, there's only been, I think, 2 or 3 judges in all of history that have been forced out or impeached.
I've never heard of one.
There's been 2, I believe.
Wow.
You have to actually be impeached to be removed from the bench.
Wow.
And so these guys are on for life. And once a president appoints them, that's it. You can never get them out of the system again. And then they guarantee themselves judicial immunity because anything that they do wrong on the bench, they can never be held accountable for. Not only that, by the way, but prosecutors have the same benefit and privilege. If a prosecutor is dirty and you can prove empirically that he's dirty, it doesn't matter. There's nothing that you can do to him. Even though you can prove that prosecutor withheld information and allowed the wrong guy to go to jail just because he wanted to close the case, there's not a damn thing you can do about it.
Wow. That doesn't seem fair at all.
Well, I mean, look, we're talking about the mob here.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what this is. But, America, we have the mobster on trial. Unfortunately, what we've got here is the Teflon Don, right?
Right.
I mean, if you remember the Gotti trials, they had about 12 of them until they finally got the guy. And you know what they got him on? Tax evasion.
Tax evasion. And who did that? Giuliani. Brought him to being the mayor.
They got him on tax evasion because they couldn't get him for murder. They couldn't get him for extortion. They couldn't get him for ordering, all kinds of other issues. But they finally got him on taxation because that's the one area where they've got loopholes big enough to put an aircraft carrier through.
Right. Anything they want to shove down that hole.
Anything they want to shove down the hole of IRS scrutiny, they can do. Here's how they did it. Here's how the ATF does it. They actually have a ruling which they passed in, I guess, in the mid-'90s. And basically what it says is that the secretary of the ATF declares that specific types of shotguns are classified as destructive devices. This is no joke. And here's what their determination was based on. That it serves no sporting purpose, quote unquote. Now, if you can show me the word sporting purpose in the Second Amendment, I'll eat my words and I'll go out there and I'll preach the gospel of the ATF all day long. But here's the deal. There is no limitation on what firearms can be owned, whether they're for sporting purpose or otherwise. And yet, the Secretary of the ATF declared unilaterally, with no government oversight, no one to refute that, no one to say, well, wait a minute.
How can he do that legally then?
They gave him authority to do so.
Oh, the congressman, all the rest of this. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so I believe it's called 94-2 is the ruling. It's 94-2 or 94-4. I've forgotten now what it was, but and I'll have to pull it up, but it's a 94-something or other, one of the rulings from the ATF. And it basically states that under that, the Secretary of the ATF has the right to declare anything that he so chooses as not serving a sporting purpose. And once they do that, then that opens up the IRS to say, okay, now that's part of the National Firearms Registry, the NFA, book, which, by the way, they automatically admit is not complete, and so I don't know how they can put you in prison for something that doesn't exist in a book that everybody admits is not complete.
Right.
But effectively, for all intents and purposes, once you have that, they and here it is, 94 5845 is Title 26 5845.
94 what?
94-2.
-2.
Yep. And it's opening a PDF, which I have to find. So anyway, here's the upshot, folks. basically what you have to understand is this is, for all intents and purposes, the Don putting everybody in a position where you are effectively hamstrung. They can choose, they can pick the rules that they want to go after you with. They have these massive loopholes that allow them to do this any way they so choose. And listen, I'm going to tell you something. There are literally tens of thousands of individuals in federal prison today for crimes that were never committed.
I see this thing right now. I got it up, and it says...
I'm going to put you on hold. We got a break coming up. We got to take it. Folks, we'll be back in just a second. You're listening to America's Voice Now.
There's one man on this earth who really gets it.
It comes down to one sentence and 3 words: secure the border, and they won't do it. Well, look, we got a trigger here and a plan in 6 months, and I don't want to hear the bull crap, the bureaucratic bull crap. Folks, I lived through this in 1986. This is a redo. Or some of you might say a redux, but it's a redo. Secure the border.
Mark Levin is on the radio.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk.
Hi, it's Hugh Hewitt on the next Hugh Hewitt Show. The next governor of Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli. The current senator from South Dakota, John Thune. I'll also be joined by Bill Kristol, and we'll talk with all of them about immigration reform and what is ahead in the United States Senate, and Marco Rubio. Don't miss any minute of the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Sundays from 6 till 7, following Money Talk with Bob Brinker, it's the Weekend Journal with Hugh Hewitt on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
Coast to Coast AM brings the Ozarks a whole new feel for radio. Midnight to 6 a.m. every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point. Where else would you get callers talking about everything from UFOs to war trends, from mental energy to anomalies, and from lost knowledge to aliens? Listen to experts and researchers who are part of the guest list every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk. Don't miss Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. Midnight to 6 a.m. every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point.
Out of 365 days a year, we celebrate holidays, anniversaries, and other important days. But there is one day you look forward to, your birthday. I wanna wish you a happy birthday. Ryan's Steakhouse of West Plains is proud to bring you the Birthday Club weekday mornings with Cooper & Company. Our daily winner receives one buffet and a drink to Ryan's. Just call your birthdays in weekday mornings with Cooper & Company at 255-0427. Brought to you by Ryan's and the Ozarks Best News Talk.
And happy birthday to you. Cha-cha-cha.
All right, we're back. So what's important for you to understand here is the way in which this information is how they do this. They, in this case, the Secretary for the ATF declares that any device which has a bore of more than a half-inch in diameter, except a shotgun or a shotgun shell, which the Secretary or his delegate finds is generally recognized as unsuitable for sporting purposes. Really? Sporting purposes? Is that really the language they use? Yes, it is. Generally recognized as particularly suitable for sporting purpose. Now, what you have to understand is something here. Every 12-gauge shotgun has a bore which is greater than a half-inch. So what happens is every other shotgun gets a waiver. You get it?
But what the rest of it says there, though, read the rest of that for them. It says, therefore, it is classified as a destructive device for purposes of the National Firearms Act. So, I mean, therefore, it's therefore that. They're putting it on Firearms Act 26 USC Chapter 53.
And they convict you under Title 26 USC 5845.
Right.
So what you need to recognize is that Title 26, like Title 18 is criminal code in the United States statutes, right?
Right.
So the way that the federal government rules are broken down, folks, everything is in a title. Title 26 is IRS code. Title 18 is criminal code. Criminal code is you robbed a bank, you assaulted, you murdered, you committed fraud, forgery, right? It's actually criminal code. Title 26 is not criminal code, it's IRS code. And then what they do is they convict you under IRS code for failing, not for actually having that item in your possession, but for failure to register it and pay a $200 tax.
Making it a criminal act.
That's exactly correct.
You didn't pay the toll man.
Correct. You're right. You didn't pay your $200.
Hey, we want our cut. We got to have our cut.
Well, here's the way they had to. Here's why they had to do it that way. There is no limitation on what firearm or what kind of firearm you can own. So, because of the Second Amendment. So effectively what happens is they convert this around and say anything big with a bore bigger than a half-inch that we haven't given a waiver to is automatically delineated as a destructive device. That would include, you hear these people say, well, what, should everybody be able to own an Abrams tank?
Of course.
There
they
you
want
go.
to, if they can afford it.
Well, yes, they should. But the point is that it's automatically labeled as a destructive device. You get it? So, and by the way, what you need to recognize is that everything else that is titled under the term destructive device is really interesting. Here's what other destructive devices are. Any explosive, incendiary, or poison gas, a bomb, a grenade, a rocket having a propellant charge of more than 4 ounces, a missile having an explosive or incendiary charge more than 1/4 of an ounce, a mine, or a similar device. Now, how they lump the shotgun in with that, you gotta wonder, right? In other words, show me where a shotgun is a bomb, a grenade, a rocket having a propellant charge of more than 4 ounces. That, by the way, that excludes, that little science rocket you shot off in the backyard with Dad, when you were a kid. Missile having an explosive or incendiary charge of more than 1/4 ounce. A mine, and then the innocuous shotgun stuck in the bottom.
Well, the rest of that act they have on there, it talks about, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Fire, the ATF, has examined a firearm identified as a Striker 12. This is what they're,
right.
using. It's the only one, which I've never even heard of it myself. I've heard of it.
I didn't either until they sold me one.
Right. And because of that, here they go ahead and say the shotgun is to determine whether it is a destructive device as that term is used in the National Firearms Act, the NFA 26, Chapter 53. Anyway, the Striker 12 and Street Trooper shotguns are virtually identical 12-gauge shotguns with a spring-driven revolving magazine. The magazine has a 12-round capacity. The shotgun has a fixed stock or folding stock. Blah, 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 goes on about the collapsed. And the shotgun, 18-inch barrel, 36 inch in length, and blah, blah, blah. The shotgun is 5.7, goes all through all this stuff. And it finally gets down to this thing, has 2 pistol grips, one in the center of the firearm below the buttstock and one in the forearm. The Striker Street Trooper is designed and developed in South Africa as a military security and anti-terrorist weapon. Various types of 12-gauge cartridge can be fired from the shotgun. A rapid indexing procedure allows various types of ammunition to be loaded into the cylinder selected for firing. All
Stop right there.
So,
by the way,
right
what they're saying is that
anti-terrorist weapon.
What they're saying is that you can load, load a slug and then buckshot and then birdshot and a slug and buckshot, birdshot, slug, buckshot. Well, guess what? You can do that in a Benelli too.
Right.
I mean, here's the difference, folks. It's legal to have, and by the way, you want to hear the amazing part? It's completely legal to have a 12-round drum on a pump, but not on a semi-automatic.
Right.
So, what you have to recognize is that this is a law which is looking for an excuse to exist. And by the way, it's not really law because this was instituted by the Secretary of the ATF, who is not elected.
Isn't that
and
a
so
tool?
Therefore,
didn't he just make a tool, though, to use against people that he wanted to?
Well, Clinton was the guy who initiated this because one of those things was apparently used down in Miami in some kind of a shootout with the cops in the 90s or something.
See, there you go.
And he went bananas on it and said, I got to do something to prove that I'm really the guy.
Right.
And so he instituted this. By the way, the amazing part of this is there's a 410 version of this same exact thing that is completely legal and doesn't require. Guess why? Because the bore is under a half inch.
Under half inch.
There you go. So what you have to recognize, folks, is this, and all of this analysis notwithstanding. Here's the problem: what we have is a mobster in charge, and we've got the Don, in this case Obama. Before that, by the way, the Don was Bush. So let's make no mistake about this. This has nothing to do with political parties. This has nothing to do with left versus right. This has to do with the United States as a mobocracy underneath multiple dons. One guy wears a blue suit, the other guy wore a red suit, but ultimately they're basically dons. Recognize what this is. And
80, 90 years running.
Their entire, everybody in their organization, all their consigliaries, if you will, are their cabinet and their Congress. And that's the simple truth. These guys, and then they have all of these enforcers underneath the IRS and the DHS and all these other organizations and groups. And our job is got to be, as prosecutors, to prove that this Uncle Sam isn't the benign, loving guy that we've all seen stroll through our community in a clean white suit. That's the simple truth. He drapes himself in the flag, but then commits every atrocity in the book. And our job, our obligation, is to bring out all the evidence, even though the judge keeps blocking it. The judge being the press.
I still have a picture right now of the Don walking through the streets from the Godfather, and Don Corleone he's walking up the stairs in his nice white suit after he takes an apple for free from the vendor.
Right, exactly. But what you don't know is that the next Don in line, takes him out so that he can be the Don.
Could
right?
be just as bad.
And look, or worse. The simple truth is this, folks. We are living in a police state that is underneath a mobster mentality. Make no mistake about it.
But Mike, don't we have to be afraid of the terrorists? I mean, this is all for our protection, isn't it?
These are the terrorists. When I was a kid, they used to have, I would hear about it all the time because I live very close to New York. And, you'd open up a new store, right? And these guys would come in after about a week and a half, and they'd be, "Hey,
how you doing?
This is a nice store you got here.
Making some money.
There's a lot of robberies and burglaries in this area. So here's what you need. You need us to protect you, and you're going to get some protection here." And the guy would say, "Well, wait a minute. I don't really need any protection. I've got a security system." And they'd say, "No. You're mistaken this. You need protection from us.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost you 20% of your entire take every month, okay? Now, we'll be back on Tuesday. Charlie's going to come by here, and he's going to bring Joey with the broken nose and 6-pack of donuts over there. And if you don't hand him 20 points, they're going to break your kneecaps."
There you go.
All right. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I tell you what, folks, if you don't get it, we're in trouble. Mike, good morning.
Morning, Mike. Hey, real quick, Common Sense Property Rights Coalition will meet tonight, 6 o'clock, the Spring Dipper in Mammoth Springs. We'll have a presentation on Common Core. You will be there, I believe, doing a presentation on the Blue Way.
Yes.
We'll have an update on Sheriff Mackin licking this weekend. Jason Smith apparently was asked if he was going to return money to Roy Blunt's PAC, which was tainted with Monsanto money, and said no, he's keeping the money. $5,000.
Is there any surprise there?
No. And I started circulating a petition, and several other people are doing it as well, asking our representatives, Sean Rhodes, Jeff Pogue, etc., to sponsor impeachment proceedings against Governor Nixon related to the Department of Revenue and the Highway Patrol. We have 50 signatures now. We'll have it there tonight if people want to sign or take petitions.
Very good. So, folks, if you get a chance tonight, it's at the Spring Dipper in Mammoth Springs. If you want to know what's going on with this Blue Ways project, you should make it your business to start joining a property rights coalition organization, whether that's the one in Mammoth Springs or the one in Mountain View or one of the many, many others around. If you don't know where these groups are, then, Mike, let's give them a phone number where they can find out. What's a number where they can call to
417-264-2435, or if they go to prcnews.org.
Right. 264-2435, or you can go to PRC News, that's P Papa Romeo Charlie News.org, and you can look for a group that's in your area. If you haven't joined one of these, attended one of their meetings yet, you are making a serious mistake because you're undercutting your own best defense. These folks work hard every day to make sure that somebody's got an eye on what's going on here with the mobsters up in Washington. And if you haven't paid attention and you're not participating in the group, then you got no reason to whine and complain. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Folks, you're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early. You can find us on the web at facebook.com/America's Voice Now.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is
KBMV Birch Tree is the Ozarks best news talk, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Fox News Radio, I'm Dave Anthony. Famous for being thorough in its audits, the